Rachel showed up to the family reunion carrying a 12-pack of off-brand soda pressed against her chest like it meant something, because to her it did. That soda wasn't just a drink, it was a symbol, a tiny gesture that said, "I'm trying, I belong here, I still care." She'd picked it up from the corner store after double-checking her bank account twice. She only had $34 to last the rest of the week, but the reunion meant something to her, still. So she spent $6 of those dollars on soda. She'd even chilled it overnight in her tiny apartment fridge, arranged the cans neatly, wiped the condensation off each one before leaving. She told herself, maybe this year will be different. But as she stepped onto the grass of her uncle's backyard, heels sinking slightly into the lawn, she immediately felt the same old chill. Aunt Linda was the first to spot her. That smile, the one that looked kind to outsiders. But Rachel knew better. "Oh, how thoughtful," Aunt Linda said. The word thoughtful curled at the edges like paper near fire. And then, with a chuckle that sliced deeper than it should have, "It's cute." Rachel froze for a second, smile still plastered to her face, unsure if she should laugh or just disappear. Behind her, Kyle's arrival was announced like a movie premiere. Someone shouted, "Kyle's here! Is that a new car?" Applause, whistles, excitement. Rachel looked down at the soda in her hands. No one asked what flavor it was. No one said thank you. No one even reached for one. She placed it quietly on the table next to a gleaming pitcher of sangria someone else brought, and walked away unnoticed. But inside, something cracked. Not because of the soda, but because once again, she had shown up with open hands and received empty eyes in return. It wasn't about the drink. It was never about the drink. It was about how they saw her. To them, Rachel wasn't the ambitious, soft-spoken artist working 2 jobs to survive. She was the girl with the little art thing, the one who brought off-brand soda to a table full of wine. She was not someone to celebrate, just someone they tolerated until they forgot she was even there. While Rachel placed her humble soda on the table quietly and unnoticed, the sound of an engine, sharp, clean, and attention-hungry, cut through the backyard like a movie scene. Heads turned. Phones came out. "Kyle's here! Oh my God, is that a new BMW?" He stepped out of the car like he owned the driveway. Aviators on, collared shirt just the right amount unbuttoned, hair slicked back like a business school brochure. Kyle didn't need to bring anything. Kyle was the thing people came to see. He wasn't holding a casserole, or a drink, or even a smile. And yet, he got applause. Rachel stood nearby, watching it unfold like a show she didn't audition for. "Kyle, tell us about your company still consulting for that crypto firm. He's so driven. Honestly, he's the only one in our generation doing anything big." Big Rachel had just finished painting a 6-foot canvas commissioned by an international gallery. She had shipped her 3rd piece to New York last week, but no one asked about that. Instead, Aunt Clara turned to her with that same patronizing tone. "Still doing that little art thing, Rachel. Little. As if every sleepless night, every blistered hand, every sail she scraped together meant nothing." Rachel swallowed hard. "Yeah," she said softly, "still doing it." But inside, she screamed, because in this family, your worth wasn't measured by heart. It was measured by how loud your entrance was. By the end of the day, the paper plates were crumpled, the ice had melted, the candles on the backyard table had burned down to waxy puddles. Laughter still echoed somewhere from the porch. Children ran barefoot through the grass. The family posed for one last photo under the golden afternoon sun, smiling arms draped over shoulders, generations gathered in one perfect frame. Rachel took it. She was the one holding the phone, the one angling the shot just right, the one saying, "Okay, one more, everyone smile." And when the photos were uploaded to Facebook that night, she saw it. Picture after picture, smiles, hugs, wine glasses, fireworks. She wasn't in a single one, not by accident, not because she stepped out, but because no one ever turned the camera around. She had spent the day throwing out napkins, cleaning spilled juice, refilling lemonade, holding someone else's crying toddler while they took candid family shots. She was the helper, the extra hand, the background, not a guest, not a member of the moment. She scrolled through the album in silence, like someone peeking into a party they weren't invited to, even though she'd been standing there the whole time. And something inside her broke quietly. Because sometimes being forgotten isn't loud. It's quiet. It's polite. It's designed. They hadn't pushed her out. No one told her to leave. But no one asked her to stay either. She began to ask herself, was I ever really part of this? Or was I always just useful? That was the moment she stopped confusing proximity with belonging, and she finally saw it. She hadn't walked away from the family, they just never made room for her. It had been 2 years since Rachel last heard from anyone in the family. No calls, no texts, no invite to any reunion. She'd gotten used to it, or so she thought. That night, she was scrolling mindlessly through Facebook after finishing a commission. Her hands were still stained with paint, her fingers stiff from hours of work. Then she saw it, a photo album, uploaded just minutes earlier. The lake house, the dock, the same picnic table where she used to sit and pass out napkins. Caption, "Another year with the whole family. Grateful for these moments." Rachel didn't blink. She just stared. No tag, no message, not even a "wish you could have made it." It wasn't just the words that cut, it was the certainty behind them. The effortless way they wrote her out of existence, the whole family. That phrase was a knife. Not loud, not fast, just cold, intentional, precise. And she realized this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was erasure, done digitally, done politely, done permanently. Rachel didn't cry. She didn't even scroll through the rest. She closed the app and whispered to herself, more calmly than expected, "All right, that's enough." She didn't cry, not a single tear. There were no fists slamming tables, no angry voicemails, no dramatic posts saying, "I'm done." Rachel didn't scream. She didn't even whisper, "Why me?" She simply sat there, phone in hand, still, breathing. And in that stillness, she felt it, a decision. Not loud, not sudden, but final. Enough. That's the word that settled in her chest. It wasn't just about the reunion. It wasn't even about that caption. It was about 10 years of trying to be enough for people who decided she never would be. 10 years of giving too much, of shrinking herself, of over-explaining her choices, of holding her breath every time a family text thread popped up, hoping maybe this time she'd be included. 10 years of being tolerated instead of seen. That night, something in Rachel shifted. She didn't know it yet, but the reunion she missed would be the last one she ever waited for. Because from that moment on, she wasn't going to ask for space anymore. She was going to build it. Rachel didn't send a text the next day. She didn't check to see who liked the photo. She didn't open the group chat. She didn't wait for an explanation, because she already knew there wouldn't be one. For years, she had clung to a thread, thin, fraying, believing it was family. Believing that if she just stayed quiet enough, polite enough, helpful enough, they would finally pull her in. They never did. And she finally stopped mistaking that thread for a lifeline. She let go. No announcements, no drama, just a quiet, intentional release. She didn't message for holidays, didn't reply to birthdays out of guilt, didn't scroll through their lives like she was still waiting to be let in. She stopped chasing crumbs of affection from a table that never set a place for her. And in that space, something surprising happened. She breathed. Not the anxious, shallow breath of trying to be accepted, but the deep, steady breath of finally being free. Cutting the rope didn't mean she stopped caring. It meant she stopped bleeding for people who never noticed she was hurting. Rachel didn't post a single photo, no new chapter announcement, no inspirational quotes, no passive-aggressive captions about outgrowing people. She just disappeared, at least from their world, because in her own world, she was on fire. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, she painted until her hands cramped, until the brush felt like a bone in her body, until the silence around her was filled with purpose instead of pain. No breaks, no weekends, no applause, just her, the canvas, and the hunger to be seen, not by them, but by the world. She worked like someone building a kingdom no one believed she could own. She didn't post her progress, didn't update her profile, didn't even check how many followers she had. Because she wasn't chasing likes, she was chasing legacy. Her apartment became a war zone of color. Unwashed mugs, sleepless nights, music looping for hours while she painted through dusk into dawn. This wasn't revenge, it was resurrection. She wasn't trying to show them what they missed, she was trying to become someone she could no longer ignore. The first painting she sold went to a woman in Boston. The woman cried when she unwrapped it. She said, "This feels like someone finally saw me." Rachel stood in her studio, still in pajamas, phone in hand, reading the message 3 times over. She'd painted it at 3 a.m., eyes half closed, music playing soft in the background. A piece born from exhaustion, heartbreak, and color. And it touched someone, really touched them. From there, it grew. More commissions came in, then gallery invitations, then collectors, real collectors, asking for originals. Rachel started shipping her art across the country to names she didn't know, faces she had never met, but they saw her. They didn't ask if she was still doing that art thing. They paid, they thanked her, they told their friends. And while her inbox filled with strangers who believed in her, her family group chat remained silent. No congrats, no we're proud of you, not even a lazy thumbs up emoji. It was like she'd gone invisible again, but this time not from failure, from success. And that cut deeper, because being ignored when you're struggling hurts. But being ignored when you finally made it, that's something else entirely. Rachel didn't need motivation. She had something stronger, pain. Not the kind that fades with time, not the kind that can be fixed with affirmations or coffee dates. This was the kind that lived in her bones, the kind that remembered every ignored message, every cropped out photo, every joke that made her shrink a little smaller. Most people wait for a cheerleader. Rachel learned to cheer for herself, in the dark, in the silence, when no one was watching. She took every bruise they gave her, emotional, invisible, and melted it down like metal. Then she built, brushstroke by brushstroke, canvas after canvas. She built something they couldn't touch, couldn't mock, couldn't dismiss. Her success wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. It didn't scream. It stood, a quiet monument made from the very silence they left her in. And maybe they never said they were sorry. Maybe they never will. But Rachel no longer needed their apology, because the pain they left her with became the empire she built on. Rachel didn't throw a party. No champagne, no real estate brag post, no I made it photo in front of a shiny new key. She simply walked into her new home alone and stood still for a moment. It was quiet. But not the kind of quiet that used to haunt her. This was peace. The floors were walnut, the walls natural stone. The kitchen, flooded with soft afternoon light, looked like it belonged in a magazine. And tucked in the back, behind a sliding glass door, her studio, the one she had sketched in her mind 1,000 times. Tall ceilings, white walls, shelves for brushes, floor-to-ceiling windows that begged the sun to come in. She built this, every inch. No loans, no parents. No help, no name to ride on. Just her work, her fire, her silence weaponized. She paid for it in full. Every dollar earned from something they once called a hobby. And yet, Rachel didn't feel pride. She felt clarity. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right. And finally, having a space where she didn't have to shrink to fit. It started with a screenshot. A cousin had stumbled across an article. A small feature in a local arts magazine. Nothing flashy, nothing viral. But there she was, Rachel, standing next to one of her paintings in a sunlit studio, hair tied up, paint on her sleeve, looking like someone who knew exactly who she was. They dropped the link into the family group chat. Is this Rachel? Wait, she has a studio like that? Wow, is she like rich now? No one tagged her. No one said congratulations. But the messages poured in, not to her inbox, but to each other. She became a topic, a mystery, a speculation, a rumor they were suddenly very curious about. Did she win the lottery? I thought she was still doing that little art thing. Who helped her buy that house? The same people who once laughed at her soda were now whispering about her countertops. Rachel didn't reply. She read the messages, closed the app, then went back to painting. Because she knew something they didn't. Their whispers meant nothing now. She wasn't interested in being the subject of gossip. She had work to do. And this time, they could talk all they wanted, from the outside. It started softly, like a breeze that wasn't supposed to come back. Hey, stranger, long time no see. You've been on my mind. You coming to the reunion this year? Rachel stared at her phone, screen glowing with names that had been silent for years. Emily, Kyle, even Aunt Linda. The same people who hadn't texted her for birthdays, holidays, or funerals now suddenly wanted to catch up. But Rachel knew. This wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't family. It was curiosity dressed up as affection. They didn't miss her. They missed the version of her they could now brag about. The Rachel who had a studio. The one in the magazine. The one who somehow, despite everything, had made it. Their messages were warm. But the warmth felt rehearsed, like actors saying lines they never practiced, until she became somebody. Rachel didn't respond, because she remembered the years when her inbox stayed cold, when they saw her struggle and said nothing. Now that she had built a life from the ashes they left behind, now they were ready to smile again? Too late. Rachel sent no invitations. There was no Facebook event, no save the date, no perfectly filtered photo with the words "New Beginnings." She simply moved in. She unpacked her canvases, hung her brushes like tools in a cathedral, lit candles that smelled like cedar and orange peel, and waited, not for guests, but for the inevitable, because she knew her family. She knew them better than they knew her. They would come, not because they were invited, but because they couldn't help themselves. They had ignored her for a decade, but curiosity had always been stronger than affection in that family. And now that Rachel had something they didn't understand, something they couldn't claim credit for, they would show up. Not for her, but for what she'd built. She didn't need to open the door. They'd find it. They always did, just a little too late. They came, not one by one, but in flocks. SUVs lined the gated street like a red carpet no one rolled out. Shiny shoes stepped out, followed by plastic smiles and curious eyes. They looked around like tourists entering a gallery they couldn't afford. Rachel watched from the window. She didn't wave. She didn't open the door. She didn't have to. They wandered through the entryway once someone boldly pushed it open, as if the house had invited them. Is this real marble? Her ceilings are huge. This rug must have cost a fortune. They complimented the backsplash. They whispered about the lighting. They touched furniture like it might whisper secrets. But no one, not a single one, asked how Rachel was. No hugs, no "we missed you," not even a "you did good." Just eyes scanning value, tongues speaking envy, hearts still hollow. And Rachel, she let them come in. But not one of them was welcome, because this was no longer their story. This was hers, and they were just uninvited background noise walking through a life they never helped build. Rachel didn't speak. She didn't offer drinks, didn't pour wine, didn't give the grand tour. She just watched as they wandered from room to room like children in a museum built by someone they didn't believe in. They ran their fingers along the marble countertops, peered into her studio, pretended to admire things they didn't understand. So this is where she paints? I didn't know she was still doing this art thing. She heard them, every whispered sentence, every shallow compliment, every careful attempt to sound impressed, but not too impressed. She said nothing, because what could she possibly say? They once called this dream foolish, a waste of time, a phase she'd grow out of. And now here they stood, inside the very thing she built with the silence they gave her. Rachel didn't need to defend herself anymore. She didn't need to explain. The walls spoke louder than words ever could. So she let them walk, let them marvel. Let them feel small in a space that was never meant to make them feel comfortable. And all the while, she remained silent. But make no mistake, her silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. Aunt Linda's voice cracked first. Her hands clutched a Tupperware container, still untouched, still unnecessary. She took a step toward Rachel, eyes wide, voice trembling. "We didn't know you were doing so well, sweetheart." The room fell silent. Even the whispers died. All eyes were now on Rachel. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just tilted her head, not in confusion, but in calculation. "No," Rachel replied, her voice calm as polished granite. "You didn't know because you never asked." Aunt Linda blinked, stunned. Rachel took a step forward, not to intimidate, but to make the distance feel undeniable. "You knew when Kyle leased a BMW. You knew when Emily got her second dog. You even knew when Uncle Barry lost weight." A pause. Then the dagger. "But me, I became invisible the day I stopped needing your approval." A hush swept the room like a wave. No one dared interrupt. "You didn't check on me. You didn't believe in me. You didn't invite me." She looked around the living room, her living room. "But now that there's marble under your feet and paintings on the wall, now you care?" She didn't yell. She didn't need to. Truth didn't need volume to be heard. And Aunt Linda, she shrank back a little like a balloon losing air. There it was. Not anger, not revenge, just facts, delivered without mercy but not without grace. Of all the people Rachel had imagined facing, it was her mother who haunted her most. Not because she screamed, but because she didn't. Not because she fought her, but because she never fought for her. Her mother stepped forward slower than the others, her eyes not proud, not teary, just tired. She looked small now, like someone trying to step back into a life she quietly walked away from. "Can we talk, sweetheart?" The voice was low, gentle, almost human. Rachel looked at her. This woman who gave her life and then watched from the sidelines as others sliced it apart. 100 memories flickered in her mind. Birthdays where Rachel sat alone by the cake, school recitals with one empty seat. That one reunion where her mother laughed at Kyle's business pitch but said nothing when Rachel talked about her first gallery show. Silence can be louder than betrayal. Rachel didn't speak yet. She let the pause do the talking. Let her mother feel the weight of years she'd ignored. Then, finally, softly, she replied, "You had 10 years to say that." The mother's shoulders dropped. Her lips trembled. But she knew this wasn't the time to cry for forgiveness. This was the time to hear the truth. "Why didn't you say anything?" Rachel asked. Not accusingly, just as a daughter who had waited her entire life for that answer. Her mother's voice cracked. "Because if I said something, they would have turned on me too." And there it was, the cowardice, the confession, the wound with no bandage. Rachel nodded, not in agreement, but in understanding. So you chose them over me? A tear slipped down her mother's cheek. But Rachel, her face stayed calm, because this time she didn't need anything from that woman. Not protection, not approval, not even love. Only truth, and she had just received it. The room was still. No one reached for another drink. No one dared say a word. Rachel turned toward the doorway slowly, deliberately. Then, without a single raised voice, she walked outside. But everyone followed, because they knew something was coming. She led them to the marble steps. The sunset poured gold across the stone. Her art glowed behind the glass. Her name was carved in brass by the door. Rachel turned. Her family stood below her on a level they had chosen long ago. And then, finally, she spoke. I remember every photo I wasn't in. Her voice was soft, but no one missed a word. Every time you called my dream cute, naive, a phase. Every reunion I was left out of. Every birthday you forgot. Every message you didn't send. She looked each of them in the eyes. No rush, no anger, just clarity. So I built this. A pause. Breath caught in every chest. Every inch of this house was built from your silence. Her words dropped like stone, heavy, unshakable. This studio, it came from the nights I cried on my floor alone. The windows, from mornings I watched you all laugh on Facebook without me. And this door, she tapped the frame gently. It's strong enough to keep out anyone who only comes once I've made it. Some tried to speak. She raised one hand. No, you don't get to reappear now, because this place, this piece, was built for someone who survived without you. And with that, Rachel turned, walked back into her home, and closed the door. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with a quiet power that echoed louder than any scream. Through the frosted glass of her door, Rachel saw movement. Shadows shifting. A sniffle, a sob. They were crying. Some with guilt, some with shame, and others just because they finally realized what they lost. But Rachel, she stood still. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, just peace. There was a time when their tears would have shattered her. Now, they didn't move her at all, because once a heart has been broken, not once, but repeatedly mocked, ignored, erased, it doesn't ache the same way anymore. She didn't hate them. She didn't even wish them pain. She had simply outgrown the version of herself that used to beg for a seat at their table. Rachel poured herself a cup of tea, the sound of the kettle louder than the whimpers outside. She took a deep breath, then turned on her favorite record, Nina Simone. A soft hum filled the house, and she smiled, not because she won, but because she no longer needed to. Rachel stepped outside, the wind brushing gently across her face, as if the universe itself had been holding its breath and was finally letting go. Her family stood quietly now, like school children, caught sneaking into a museum, surrounded by artwork they once said would amount to nothing. Rachel looked at them, all of them, some still wiping tears, some still waiting for the door to reopen. But she knew what she had to say, and she'd waited 10 years to say it. If you had supported me back then, maybe I wouldn't have worked this hard. Maybe I would have been comfortable, safe, average. She paused, let her words echo in the silence. So, thank you for the silence, for the rejection, for making me invisible. She took one more step forward, eyes steady, because that's what gave me freedom. That's what gave me the hunger to build something so undeniable it didn't need your approval to exist. No anger, no sarcasm, just truth. The kind that doesn't beg for applause, but demands respect through presence alone. You erased me, and in doing so, you set me free. Rachel turned back toward the house. The sun had dipped lower, casting golden lines across the floor of her studio. She walked through the front door, not with pride, not with revenge, but with peace. The kind that doesn't need permission. The kind that comes after choosing yourself. Behind her, the gate began to close. Slowly, quietly, without a slam or a scream. Just a final exhale, like the end of a storm. It didn't close out of hate. It closed because the chapter had ended. Rachel didn't look back. She didn't need to. She was finally home. Not because of marble floors, not because of the view, but because she had built this space with her hands, her pain, her silence, into something no one could ever take away again. And now she belonged, not to them, but to herself. Sometimes silence is not abandonment, it's a gift in disguise. Being excluded hurts, but it also gives you the space to build, to grow, and to define yourself without needing approval from anyone. You don't have to chase validation from people who only notice you when you succeed. Your worth isn't defined by invitations, family titles, or Facebook photos. It's defined by how you rise when no one's clapping. And when you finally build a life on your own terms, not for applause, but for peace, that's when you truly win. You don't need a seat at their table if you've already built your own house. If Rachel's story touched your heart or reminded you of your own silent battles, hit subscribe to Athena Stories, where every week we share stories of quiet strength, redemption, and emotional truth. Because sometimes the most powerful victories come from those no one believed in. And don't forget to turn on notifications. You never know when the next story might speak directly to you.